And I agree with that, and what we'll do is we'll go back and look and see what information we are getting and see if it's spotty or more complete. Because I don't have a sense of how much. I would imagine some cases we get it and some we don't, but let us look into that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Senator Liu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. I just appreciate your coming here and giving us an update about how far you're along in this project, and you give the April 2015 date as a date that you're going to be implementing this thing full board to all the affected institutions. And my curiosity is this: it's kind of where Senator Hancock is how long is this pilot project going to happen, and is there a closure date to it? It relates to what Senator Bell talked about in terms of resources and what's the obligation of all of us to put more resources into your program. This is about a third of our prison system. It's not everything, so we can only, imagine what's happening at other institutions, et cetera. So I just, it sounds like a rather overwhelming problem here. And the more interesting thing for me is that when we talk about drug use, tobacco, methamphetamines, and all these things that are coming into the prison system, it is about addiction. And some of us went to Portugal last year to talk about how the decriminalization of addiction and treating it more of as a health issue when you're going to become a health institution here, as opposed to a penal institution to punish people for the crimes that they have committed. And so it's an interesting, from my perspective, of how we are evolving, because I think the public is not wanting to incarcerate and wanting more people to be treated for their issues, as opposed to just lock them up and throw away the key, because that doesn't seem to be working. So, I mean, and I do agree with you that, if the longer you go with a study, the more you can, more results we can get from it, and how to improve the system. But then the question is, when is that cutoff? When do we get the return that we need in order to make our systems better? Do you have any idea? I mean, is the Pennsylvania system ongoing? It's not a study anymore. It's just the way you perform and operate.
Well, the Pennsylvania system, yeah, it's ongoing. It's been that way for 20 years. And they developed, of course, got a little better, refined things over time, but that's just the way they operate now. Just the way they are. Do all the prisoners that come into the system get a drug test? In Pennsylvania? Uh-huh. Yes. Well, I mean, those are just, for me, just some simple information stuff that we know how to divert people into various strategies or programs to improve people's conditions, as opposed to trying to figure it out, and deal with it. And I think you have all the components here and people willing to stretch themselves to help solve these problems. But I do think that, well, we don't have resources forever. We need to have the best practices going forward. And I would be interested in seeing what happens after 6 months or a year to your findings, and whether or not we can make substantive changes in the penal system or health system to address some of the issues that we are finding our population having difficulties with. So it's not a question, it's just a comment, observation. And nobody wants to get information to you any quicker than I do. And I certainly will, we certainly will move ahead as quick as we can, because the quicker we can come with something, maybe the quicker we can get some more resources and then expand this beyond the institutions that we're in at this particular point and make the system better for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Liu. Senator McGuire.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman, and I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the Chairwoman for her work on this important issue and for bringing us together today. Thank you so much. And to the Secretary, looking forward to working with you, and thank you for your thorough report this morning. have a few comments as well as questions. And I think that from the early numbers that you provided the committee, we're seeing some positive results from what was recently implemented. So I do want to congratulate and say thank you for advancing that. And I think that your move and through the chairwoman's work, this is all about safety, obviously, of inmates and safety of staff. And there is that direct correlation, as you had mentioned, related to drug trafficking and violence within the state prison system. Have a couple of questions related to this. I recently come from the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, and one of the items that we have advanced is purchasing a full-body scanner. The reason for that was we are seeing overdoses within the county jail and inmates bringing illegal substances in through various cavities. And we've been able to advance that to ensure we're not seeing those overdoses and, frankly, also for staff safety. Do you see that as an eventual move on the department's behalf? My other question is, in regards to metal detectors or full-body scanners, is there resistance from the department or staff team to be able to move in that direction?
I don't think there's resistance. You mean putting all staff through?
Correct.
Yeah, so the problem with that is it's called walk time. And so if we start running everybody through scanners, it takes more time to process people in, people don't get relief from their posts, people don't get out, and then you end up having to pay a lot of money in overtime as a result of that. I mean, it could be in the $50 to $60 million range if you tried to put everybody, all staff, through a metal detector. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. As far as the full-body scanners, we, as I mentioned, are looking at getting some of them in.
Yep. It's about $300,000 a piece.
Pardon?
About $300,000 a piece.
It depends. There's the kinds that TSA have, I think, are closer to $200,000. There's another kind that looks into body cavities.
Correct.
Uses X-rays more. That's not something that we would want to be using probably on staff or visitors.
Sure.
But it is possible to use something like that on inmates. I know a number of county jails are doing that because inmates will take a hit to bring the drugs in, knowing they're going to get out in a couple days.
Exactly.
I've talked to some of the sheriffs about that, and that's a very valid concern. So I think we're looking at both kinds, and we're going to be seeing which works better for us and what the cost is, but we're looking at both those kinds of scanners as well as the ones that TSA has.
In understanding the large numbers that you have just brought forward relating to systemizing, if you will, a new process, can you talk about model states? When it comes to staff, in particular ranks of staff that are having to walk through a metal detector, mostly those individuals that have direct interaction with inmates, can you walk us through, and pardon my ignorance on this, of how other states have been able to make that work?
Well, other states have been able to make it work. Either they're not union states like Virginia, where they don't have as much of the union issues. Mm-hmm. In Virginia, by the way, everybody goes through a metal detector and also gets pat searched in addition to the metal detector. States like, Michigan, Pennsylvania, staff go through the metal detector. In Pennsylvania, the reason, the way we did it is we paid for the walk time. We bought the walk time out, and it was a conscious decision to do that. I know the Federal Bureau of Prisons didn't used to run people through, and then one of their staff brought a gun in Florida and shot some people, and so they started now running people through it, and I don't know what they did as far as the walk time issue. But, I mean, that is the ideal situation, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. I mean, we do have an Operation Disconnect every couple times a month. They will pull staff out randomly to search staff with metal detectors, and even now we do the same thing. While we'll randomly pull you out to do the ion scan with you, we can also randomly pull you out and do the metal detector, and that's not the most effective way to do it, but it puts people on notice that if they're going to try to bring something in, that they've got a chance of getting caught, and the consequences are pretty severe if they do.
And I think the other piece is what I would hope if there's going to be some additional evaluation, and I can only imagine it's going to have to be a pilot project, right, to be able to see how that could work in specific institutions, is that looking at a cost-benefit analysis as well, and what it's costing the system currently, with the understanding that it's a big price tag to be able to advance, but what that is also costing the system if, whether it's cell phones, drugs, potential weapon smuggling coming in, and how to be able to play those numbers out. I think that's going to be important, obviously, within any evaluation. My other item, and I know this is a theme for today, and that is on the issue of substance abuse. Know it's something that you're interested in, and also know that it's going to come with a price tag. But I think if we take a look at this state's recidivism rate and what it's costing taxpayers, and frankly, the low level of outcomes that we're seeing with individuals that are within the state prison system, I think that one, obviously, going to be a better outcome for the inmate if we're actually getting to the issue when it comes to drug and or alcohol abuse. And I think it's going to also cost the taxpayer less long-term if we're focusing on those comprehensive programs. Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree totally. I think you're right on the money.
And what I've heard you say is that you may be looking at something later this spring, coming back, working with the chair on some additional robust program enhancements on that.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your time, and it's really good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McGuire. Before we move on to public comment, let me just also thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I have one technical question because I am interested in the details of this, which does relate to the strip searching potentially of visitors. In reading both sets of regulations, I did notice that for staff, it says very explicitly that if they come up with a dirty test or a cell phone identification, they will be pat searched in a private place by a same-gender supervisor. I didn't see that. Maybe I just missed it in the regulations for visitors. But obviously, same gender, privacy, but strip search is, it's a different order of magnitude. And I really think that we have to get some kind of parallel construction here that's going to work and that's going to ensure that strip searches aren't used in a way that is demeaning and humiliating for the mostly women that will be coming in to visit prisons. And I just wonder if you have any comment on that.
Well, any searches like that we do, Senator, are done in a private area and are done by the same gender. And they're done by people who have been trained appropriately. And you know, we realize that, you know, that is that's something that's going a little beyond the bounds when you do something like that. And so you want to be careful, and you don't want to demean somebody or make them feel bad or anything else. And in fact, I've been looking at, you know, we only left that there for visitors as an option if they didn't want to take the non-contact visit. And I've been thinking about maybe we should just remove that as an option, and just, you know, they come up hot on the thing, they get the non-contact visit, and we don't go that way unless we have other information, unless we have something beyond the ion scan machine or the canine alert, then maybe you still do that. And you know, frankly, we didn't do that in Pennsylvania. Now, in Pennsylvania, the staff were not sworn staff. They weren't peace officers. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But still, I have been looking about, as we said, we're going to be refining our regulations, and that might be one of the things that we're going to refine on how we handle any kind of unclothed search.
I think that would be helpful, and I also appreciated our conversation about whether or not there are enough non-contact opportunities or rooms or whatever they are so that it wouldn't mean somebody traveling a long distance only to have to go home.
Well, absolutely, and, the direction, if we go in that direction, then the wardens will be told to reserve so many spaces for those purposes so that they do have that opportunity. Because you're right, we don't want somebody coming a long distance and then not being able to have a thing. And, what will frankly happen over time is I think some of the alerts, or maybe because they were around somebody that had or handled drugs, if they're not trying to smuggle something in, and, they learn to stay away from it. That's what happened in Pennsylvania. They learned that you can't ride in a car with somebody smoking marijuana the whole way up, even if they're not trying to smuggle something in, without us, something's going to alert on that. So, I think as we move forward, people will learn, and that will become less of a problem, but we are looking at making some changes there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, Senator Monning, before he left, indicated that he was interested in knowing if there's any technology that can be used to render contraband cell phones ineffective. And Senator Anderson indicated that he was interested in more concrete data on who's been apprehended for drugs or for cell phones, so we know more about where it's coming from.
And we can get you that data, Senator, and as far as rendering cell phones ineffective, there is a system called Managed Access, which has been installed in 17 of our institutions. And it does limit the ability to use cell phones. We know that it works. It's not 100% effective, but it works pretty effectively because the inmate payphones are seeing an increased use in those institutions. So we know they're not able to always use their cell phones. They're still having some difficulty with blocking 4G. And so some of the newer smartphones, if an inmate gets one of them, they can still get out. And anytime you're doing what we're doing, if you just walk around, you might find an area where you can get a signal out. So like I said, it's a tool. It is working. It is helping in those institutions. And they will be able to block 4G fairly soon. And then we're hoping to roll it out in the rest of the institutions, over the next few years.
Okay. Thank you. I think there'll be a great deal of interest in that. And also in looking at the full body scanners or metal detectors that you can just walk through pretty quickly regarding cell phones. I know that there are dogs that can do both cell phones and drugs, but it seems like, generally speaking, the dogs are used for drug contraband and the metal detectors would be more appropriate for cell phones. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I think, again, they're different they're tools. And so the dogs that can do cell phones do fine. I mean, we had one that found over 1,000 cell phones in his career so far. And so they can be effective. But on the other hand, a metal detector, even if it's a handheld metal detector, can also be effective.
Were those cell phones being smuggled in by visitors? Or
those were cell phones that were found inside.
Inside,
yes.
That's right. They're found
primarily
inside.
Found inside.
Right. I think Senator Anderson's question was geared toward a question that we all have of wanting to know how they get there and what we can do to stop that. Just a final remark. I think you can hear the interest in treatment availability, treatment that is, in other words, that we have both, we have cure in addition to suppression. This country's been involved in a war on drugs for maybe 25 or 30 years, and it's resulted in more drug use and mass incarceration. And so we don't have the money for treatment and to educate our kids. And to the extent that we can put our correction system in California out in front in dealing with that, I think we'd all be very proud and that we'd have a system that would, in the long term, save us a lot of money. But thank you very much for your thinking on this and for being here today to answer our questions. We appreciate it very much. Finally, are there comments from the public? You don't have to be here for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Thank you, Senator Hancock and members. I'm Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California. We are concerned about the impacts on visitors, and we hope that any evaluation component of this new program will look at the impact on prison visitation. I think over the years we've seen that visitors are often the target of efforts to reduce contraband in prisons. We've seen numerous attempts by previous legislatures to crack down, for example, on cell phones in prisons by increasing penalties on visitors found in possession of a cell phone when they're being processed into visitation, and yet there haven't been really any efforts to reduce the number of cell phones that are brought in by vendors and staff, people that go into the prison on a daily basis, day after day. And so this has really, I think, created a bad feeling among many people who do visit in prisons that they are continually being subjected to increased scrutiny and so forth. In fact, we've had bills that tried to felonize this. And so I think that most visitors would agree that cell phones and drugs in prisons are a problem. It just seems it would behoove us, given the security risk posed by cell phones, that we have to find a way to subject all people who go in and out of prisons to contraband searches. We have heard anecdotally about false positives from EON scanners. Paper money is also used to ingest certain drugs in the general population, such as cocaine and methamphetamine. Our understanding is that people who handle money that's been used for this purpose can trigger a false positive. And we're just really worried about efforts that are so intrusive that they could discourage visitation, and we hope the legislature will take that into effect. Lastly, I strongly agree that we have to attack drug use in prison, not only from the supply side, but from the demand side, and that really requires good programming within the prison. The war on drugs, whether it's in the general population or within the incarcerated population, has been a failure, and I think we make the problem worse when we only employ punitive measures to try and reduce drug use in prisons. So we just hope that the legislature will also take a good look at how these efforts are impacting visitation. It's very hard for many family members to travel very long distances to visit. Visitation has been cut back to 2 days per week, and the burden on families is tremendous. We know that visitation, family contact is key to reducing recidivism, a very important factor there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindberg. Are there other comments from the public? Seeing and hearing none, I want to thank everybody very much for coming. We'll be doing some follow-up with the department, taking the concerns that we've heard today, and making sure that when we have our actual budget hearing, we can follow up and hopefully get some really important improvements to our program and really set California on a good course on all of these issues. Thank you so much for coming. And the meeting is adjourned.